Welcome to Lecture 9, Section 2.8. So we're working on proportions. So the definition is that two ratios are equal is what a proportion is. For example, we have this ratio equal to that ratio. That's a proportion. Or you could just say a fraction equal to a fraction. So for example 1, we're asked to solve for n. So I'm going to show you one way to solve for n using proportions, and then later on we'll look at another way. So for the first way, we have 2 over n, and a way of thinking about it is looking at 18. We know that these two fractions are supposed to be equal. So the question is, what did I multiply to 9 to get 18? Well, I had to multiply 2. Oops, let me change my pen. I had to multiply it by 2 to get 18. So to figure out what n is supposed to be, I know it's just whatever 2 times 2 is. That will give me my n value. So what is 2 times 2? Well, 2 times 2 is 4. So the missing value, the n value that we were looking for, is 4. So n must equal 4 for this proportion to be true. All right, let's look at the next one. We have 5 equals k over 6, and we're trying to figure out what the k value is. Well, to do that, we're going to use the same method. We're going to try to figure out how we get from the first fraction to the second fraction. Well, in the first fraction, our denominator is a 1. So how do we get from 1 to 6? Well, we multiply that by 6. And following that pattern, the k value must be whatever 5 times 6 is. And what is 5 times 6? Well, 5 times 6 is 30. So 5 over 1 is the same as 30 over 6. So k is 30. Okay, so the method, or at least this method for solving proportions, is you're just trying to figure out how to get from the first fraction to the second fraction. Now we're going to look at a different method. This one is the much more commonly used method. Okay, this is cross multiplication. So if you have two ratios that are equal, okay, or a proportion, then you can cross multiply to solve. So for example, if we're given this proportion, how we would solve is you'd multiply, and it looks like a cross, which is, I believe, where we get the name cross multiplication. You'd multiply the denominator to the remainder of the other fraction, and then multiply the numerator of the first fraction to the denominator of the second fraction. So let's go ahead and use this method to solve. So we have our fraction. Let me rewrite this just a little bigger. We're asked to solve for, oh, and notice this is a capital N. Please note, in math, capital N is not the same as a lowercase n. Okay, so you have been warned. If I see this on an exam, more than likely I will take a point or two off if you change from using a capital to a lowercase. What do I mean? Well, for example, if you started to write the equation like this, that's a no-no in math because we're asked to solve for capital N, not lowercase n. Okay, because oftentimes in math, a capital letter or a lowercase letter mean two very different things. So just keep that in mind, be careful. All right, so 2 over 3 equals 4 over n. Let's go ahead and use cross multiplication. I'm going to multiply these two together. So that'll be 2 times n equals, and then I'll multiply the 3 times the 4, which will be 3 times 4. So let's rewrite this. 2n equals 12. Well, solving for n, I know how to do that. I'm just going to divide by 2 from both sides. And I get capital N equals 6. And there we go, we box our answer, and note our equal signs are in a nice line, everything looks good. All right. Next one, solve for p. Okay, I'd really want to use cross multiplication for this, but there's a problem. The problem here is, note, this is not a fraction equal to a fraction. This is two fractions being subtracted equal to a number. So we actually cannot use cross multiplication yet. So we need to get the plan, get into proportion. Everything in life should be in proportion, right? Okay, so let's to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add that fraction to the other side. And when I do that, hopefully I can make this look like a fraction equal to a fraction. 4 over p, and notice it's a capital P. 4 over 1 plus 2 over 3. All right, let's go ahead and add these two fractions so we can make them into one fraction, which will then make my problem into a proportion. Let's see, how can I need a common denominator, which would be 3. So we'll go ahead and do the building up property. Go ahead and pause this video and try to complete the addition of that fraction, and check back in with me in a second. Okay, so now we have 4 over p equals 12 over 3 plus 2 over 3. Then 4 over p equals 14 over 3. All right, now we are where we want to be. This is a proportion. So let's go ahead and cross multiply. So that's going to be 14 times p equal to 4 times 3. And then 14p equals 12. Okay, solving for p, we're going to go ahead and get rid of that 14 that's being multiplied by dividing it. And then p equals 12 over 14. But 12 over 14 is not simple. Those are both divisible by 2. Divide the top and bottom by 2, and I get p equals 6 over 7. And there we are. We're done. And remember, you can go ahead and check these by plugging them back into the equation to make sure your answer is correct. All right, moving on. So applications with proportions. All right, we're moving into word problems. Huzzah. Okay. Real quick note, as we're moving forward, this is something I really need to see on your exam notes. Please remember, your notes are not just scratch work. Let me write this down. Exam notes are evidence, not just scratch work. Or not just. It should be not scratch work. Let's erase this. So they're evidence, not scratch work. Which means for word problems, you should write your answer on your exam notes. In a complete sentence, you need to have a let statement, an equation, solving, and your sentence. All of these need to be shown on your exam notes. Okay? You have been warned. All right, example 4. If Company A claimed that 80% of dentists prefer their brand of toothpaste and 750 dentists were surveyed, how many dentists prefer Company A's brand of toothpaste? Okay, so we need to write a let statement first. And what is a let statement? Well, the let statement is just identifying what we're trying to find. Okay, so let statement, how do we find this? We'll just underline what are we trying to find. We're trying to figure out how many dentists prefer Company A's toothpaste. All right, so let's just assign a variable to that. Why not assign D? Let D equal number, let me be more professional here and use an actual word, number of dentists that prefer Company A. Okay, that's what we're trying to find. So again, your let statement is pretty much always going to be what you're trying to find, or what you don't know is another way of putting it. Because we don't know how many dentists prefer Company A. Since we don't know it, it's our variable. All right, now we need to write an equation. What we're trying to figure out is how many dentists there were. So we can go ahead and try, let's write a sentence for this. Since we're talking about percents, I often like to try write sentences. So what we're trying to figure out is what is 80% of 750? That's what we're trying to figure out, right? We don't know what 80% of 750 is. Well, once I've written a sentence with the word is, I'm golden, because I can translate that directly to an equation. Because remember, what does is mean in math? Is means equal sign. And the what, that's the variable, that's what we're trying to find. That's our variable D, the number of dentists, because we don't know. So D equals, and remember we have to translate the 80% into 80 over 100, or you could use a decimal. You know, in fact, let's go ahead with a decimal. Why not? Okay, so the decimal is going to be 0.8. Of in math translates to multiplication and 750. All right, so you can go ahead and calculate that out. Let me check my calculator. That is going to be 600. So D equals 600. So our answer is, what did our variable stand for? Our variable was the number of dentists that prefer company A, which we know is D, or 600. So our answer will be, remember, complete sentence, 600 dentists prefer company A, period. All right, so as usual, the plan for me, whenever I start to see percents, most of the time I will start to think, can I write an equation or can I write a sentence with the word is? Once I can do that with that word is, then I can just go ahead and write my equation right below it. There are other ways to do these problems, but I find if you write an equation with the word is, oftentimes it's simpler. But the main things I'll be grading on is if you have a let statement telling me what your variable is, if you have an equation, if you solve your equation correctly, and if you have a sentence. All right, example 5. A hybrid car can travel 95 miles, okay, on 1 gallon of gas. How many gallons of gas are needed for a 500-mile trip? All right, well, let's go ahead and just start with our let statement. Pause the video and ask yourself what you think the let statement should represent. I'll go ahead and pick our variable for us. Let G be our variable, and go ahead and write down what you think it's supposed to stand for. Okay, well, remember, our let statement is describing the thing we're trying to find, and we're trying to figure out how many gallons of gas are needed. So that's going to be G. How many gallons of gas are needed? All right, let's go ahead and write an equation. Well, this one doesn't have to do with percent, so I'm not going to use that sentence method that I use for percents. Instead, this one is comparing. It says we're comparing 95 miles to 1 gallon, and then comparing that to some amount of gallons for 500. So we know that these two are paired together. 95 miles is paired together with 1 gallon. I see the beginnings of a proportion here. Because what we want to know is what the pairing of 500 miles to D, not D, why did I choose D? To G gallons. We know 95 miles will get us, or we'll get 95 miles from 1 gallon, but we want to know how many gallons will give us 500 miles. This looks an awful lot like those equations we were solving before. These two, we can equate them. I have now just created a proportion. I have one equivalence on this side and the other equivalence on this side. So let's go ahead and rewrite this without the units and solve. Okay, so pause the video, solve by yourself, and check back in with me in a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve by cross multiplying. So we have 500 times 95G. Go ahead and continue our work over here. Solving for G, we need to get rid of that 95. So we'll divide by 95 since it's being multiplied. Okay, we'll go ahead and plop this into a calculator. All right, we're going to go ahead and round this up. So, as usual, as I say, if we do not give you directions on rounding, just round to the nearest tenth. So the nearest tenth, well, this is about, oops. Oh, that's uglier. Oh, that's even, okay, wait. Nice, there we go. G is about 5.3. So what did G stand for again? What does this mean? Remember, words, word problems always should have meaning associated to them. So G is the amount of gallons of gas that are needed. So my final sentence will be, we need 5.3 gallons of gas. And if you want to overachieve, you could go ahead and write for a 500-mile trip. Okay, as always, you need your number answer and your units. Plus, please always include your capital first letter and your period, because we are in college and we know how to capitalize letters and write a complete sentence and end with a period. Or, as always, an exclamation point if you want. Please email me if you have any questions or need any help with the homeworks.